Hello there everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Joesephyr and welcome to another Should You Pull video for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. Now we're going to be talking about 9 and Fujin this time, but before we get started on any of that, how about them Ultima Weapons over on the JP side of things? Like, I know I don't normally cover JP, but I'm actually going to leave a link down below to a tweet I've made because we've got some infographics by way of REM, so a massive thank you goes out to you for that. That'll explain everything that's all about, but it's some pretty exciting stuff. We've got some really interesting mechanics coming out of that, and EXs are getting extended. Like, we've seen what happens with Ceres and what they do with her. It's very exciting stuff for the future, so keep an eye out for that. But like I said, today we're going to be talking about 9 and Fujin. So if you're interested in those characters or the Lufenia that comes along with 9's Lost Chapter, then as always, stay tuned and keep on watching. Now, before we get started, of course, don't forget to check out all of my social media links down below, including Twitter, Twitch, Discord, and Patreon. I cannot thank you guys enough for being with me over my birthday over the last week, whether it was the birthday subathon or the streams I did after my birthday. I actually, for the first time in a very long time, have to say I've had probably the perfect birthday, and I got to celebrate that with my in real life friends because things have lifted up lockdown-wise over in the UK a lot more, and I got to celebrate with my audience and you guys over on Twitch as well, and it was honestly just fantastic. So a huge thank you goes out to everyone that's been a part of that. Obviously with Patreon, I always shout out one of my patrons every time I release a new video, and today that person's going to be Ferntendo, who has been on my Patreon for quite some time now and is a big World Ends With You fan, as you can see through their title card. I am one as well, so I love shouting this one in particular. And therefore, if you would like to be get other benefits such as having a title card made just for you that goes at the credits at the end of all of my videos, being a part of voice chats we all do together, one of which will be happening very, very shortly, as well as being part of Would You Pull and all sorts of other benefits, then perhaps you might like to consider becoming a patron and supporting the channel further yourself as well. Obviously, don't forget to check out all of the other resources for Dissidia or Opera Omnia that are out there, and all the other content creators out there besides myself too. So first things first, let's take a look at the banner and what's featured on it and what you can expect from the two characters that are going to be on there. So before we go into 9, who we're going to talk about first because he has his LD boards, but we largely already know what he does, on the banner is going to be 9's full kit, so EX, LD, etc. Fujin's full kit, so it's another double LD banner. Barrett's EX, which is like, meh. And Golbez's Burst if you haven't already got it, but none of the rest of his kit. Now, 9 is actually a very interesting character. He has a set of roles. He's a bit of a mishmash of like Warrior of Light and a range damage dealer that mixes in some very, very nice ways. So his skill 1 puts up shields, much like Warrior of Light does, to the party, equal to the amount of damage that he deals with his attack. And then his second ability gives a healing attack that also grants various different sort of offensive buffs, so speed plus, attack plus, max brave plus, and these give him, these stack up to 5, and these give 9 himself more attack and max bravery equal to the number of stacks he has. And then with his EX, it's a multi-hitting HP attack, which is always a bonus, 3 HP attacks in fact. You also heal off of it. It's a slow charge, which isn't fantastic, but it also gives you more attack and brave overflow, and it also gives you 20% more attack while you have multiple enemies on the board. So he's designed as an AoE attacker that can shield you from damage, etc. Now his LD is actually very, very interesting. Now what his LD does is it doesn't actually do damage at all. It sets up a buff called White Knight to the party for 6 turns, but actually longer, but we'll get to the LD boards in a minute. And then what that does is it gives you a little bit of attack, a little bit more brave overflow, but it also makes it so the next HP damage you take is 0. And then once that happens, it changes into a different buff called Rebellious Fangs, which is a stronger offensive version of the White Knight buff. So you basically trade that one lot of no HP damage for a much bigger attack stat. So all of this on its own is all very interesting. His LD boards actually add a lot to what you get out of him. So bear in mind that White Knight, the attack itself, doesn't actually do damage. It just batteries the party. Well, now, the White Knight buff itself is extended to 10 turns rather than 6, which is quite big. And then it also instantly gives you the 5 stacks of Wild Roar, so you don't have to use his skills quite so much. And it also recovers a use of Primal Roar after you use it, which is his shield granting buff. So that's actually really, really good. because 9's EX charges slowly, you do have to rely on using his regular skills quite frequently, which isn't really ideal, because his HP plus, his high jump plus, is a 3-hit AoE bravery single target HP attack, which is good. It's an AoE bravery attack, but obviously you want to get that laser lance triple HP dump as frequently as you can. So the wild roar buff itself increases with his LD boards to make it so that now you have bravery damage going down, the amount of damage he deals going up, and then a really big like attacks buff, so it extends the party, so the attack buff, the max overflow, and critical damage goes up for him as well. So it makes him into like this aura bot that can reduce damage to 0. It's actually very good. The White Knight buff then gives max bravery up as well, and then when that converts to rebellious fangs, you then get double the max bravery to coincide with the overflow and the attack you got from it before. Bravery damage goes up by 30% and crit rate goes to 100%. This makes Rebellious Fangs actually a very desirable buff that you can keep hold of while you're waiting until a telegraphed HP attack comes along that you just go, actually, I'm just going to put White Knight back on. And you get 4 uses of White Knight, so it can protect you against enemies that like have recast attacks, like really nasty things. And 9's damage is actually really quite good. Like, honestly, I think like when I was doing my future pulls and stuff, I think I undersold 9 a little bit because I didn't get him the first time around, and now I'm kind of looking at it and going, actually, this is really quite good. Like, the fact that you're doing quite a lot of damage with his regular skills, his HP plus is actually pretty good, his EX hits like a bus, and now that he's getting all of these buffs, he's transferring them over to other characters, he's able to reduce HP damage to 0 for the worst possible moves that an enemy can do. I might have changed my mind on him a little bit, to be honest, because I'm looking at it and thinking, actually, there's a lot here to like. And that, like, this LD board, you know, bravery damage, like, casually dropped by 40%. Like, why not? Because it's attached to Wild Roar, so it's attached to him, and yet it reduces it for the party, so it's a permanent thing. He deals 30% more damage. He deals 30% more damage if you've got Rebellious Fangs up. And because his attacks hit quite so many times, like he's got like the multiple HP dumps in his EX, he's gonna have turns where he just churns out damage, and the fact that he's doing this while protecting you, I think I really like 9. Now, taking a quick look at like 9's like call abilities, they're actually pretty solid as well. Like 9's regular call ability is his Primal Roar, which is the shield granting one. So that's pretty nice. Like, obviously you want to set up as much damage as you can deal with this, so the shields are as big as they can be. And they only last for 4 turns. They're not going to last forever, but being able to preemptively put a shield up just by having the Wild Guard up for a few turns is kind of nice. And then 9's LD call ability grants White Knight, which is the ability that dispels HP damage. So that's actually really nice to have on a call ability. Like, just to be able to go, actually, I really don't like this one attack that this boss is going to do, so I think I'm going to put White Knight up, and that way that it just doesn't do anything. And that's just a nice thing to have. Like, it doesn't do any damage, of course, which is one thing. Like, if you don't like that about ability, then fair enough. But I think that having access to this, like, it's kind of nice. Like, obviously soon we're going to get Warrior of Light's rework in the next couple of months, and that's going to come out as do a sort of similar thing. But I really quite like 9 in general. With his high armor, etc., he has the support keystone. The Unity Keystone, which obviously we know how much I love the Unity Keystone. And then with his high armor plus, he increases party-wide bravery damage by 3% per limit break, and then an extra 1% of HP damage per limit break. Again, I don't think you really need this. Like, I think I'd save my Lufenia armor tokens for characters like Bartz or Tifa, characters like that. But it's, you know, it's a party-wide buff, so if you're going to use 9 a lot, it's pretty good. So now let's take a look at Fujin. Now, Fujin's a bit of a sad story. Like, I mean, Fujin's a character I really love. Like, I love Fujin as a character. When she got her EX, she was actually one of my favourite characters to use for quite some time. But her LD and lack of rework, etc., just kind of highlights how very, very average she is, underperforming, in fact. So if you've not used Fujin before, her role is that she's a wind enchant imperiler. That's pretty much it. So Metsu is just a AoE Brave HP attack with split damage that both of her skills grant the Silent Wind buff, which is the party-wide wind and a bit of attack, and then Brave regen, which is fine. It's quite nice. And then Psy, which is her second ability, is a splash damage attack that then puts the wind resist down on it. That's kind of it. And then we move on to Fujin's Pinwheel, which gives her her EX attack. This isn't terrible. It gives her, like, it's an automatic launch, like AoE, so you get the splash damage on it, so you get launches off of it. And it also grants a debuff called Wind Slash, which is a debuff that deals extra damage to their launch capability, so it makes them easier to launch. But it's only 3 hits, so by this point in time, it's really nothing special. It also puts the wind resist down on there, so when you've put ingots and everything into it, you get attack up, the silent wind buff. You just get all of that stuff, which is kind of nice. And then it's a 10-hit AoE, 100% damage attack, but she only gets an HP plus, which is a brave HP that does battery the party, but she doesn't get anything from her LD on this. So let's look at the LD itself and see what we get from it. Now, even with the boards, all this does is increase the bravery hit count and make it so that you get like Wind in Peril off of this as well. So there's not much to like comment on the LD boards, but it's a AoE brave HP attack with split damage that hits twice, which is very average at this point. You only get 3 uses out of it, which compared to 9 with what his can do, it's like, or even like other characters that have Imperil enchant based attacks. Like, I don't think this is one that warrants being a 3-use skill. And you get another buff called Gust of Wind, which every time you hit weakness damage, it batteries the party. And it also gives a bit of attack and party brave overflow. It's kind of it. Like, you get 12 turns of it once you've done everything, she gets a Brave ++ at the end. It's a bit sad, honestly. Like, I'm really sad that Fujin didn't get more. She's usable. Like, if you really like Fujin, she's definitely usable. But given that in 2 weeks we're going to be getting a character or even a week, sorry, that's also very wind heavy, and blows her out of the water, even though he doesn't party enchant for wind, the chance of you actually making use of Fujin after Bartz's release is very minimal. Because while she provides some auras, like she provides some attack, some max bravery, she has initial bravery regen, things like that, a bit of speed, and obviously the wind enchant in peril, it's fine. The LD is really just not enough, in my opinion, and the only reason that you would use it is because of, like, well, you just wouldn't. That's the problem, is that as time progresses, she's going to get thrown under the rug so quickly because so many other characters are stronger than her, even within her own element, that she's just not going to get used very much. Within this mission, she's fantastic because of, like, I'll get to the mission itself in a moment, but she just doesn't really do a lot. She's just there to do launch, Enchant in Peril, and I mean, when you compare to characters like Ignis, who is also an Enchant in Peril character, that provides HP damage up as well, debuff immunity. There's so many little nuances to characters that provide Enchant in Peril now, that just providing Enchant in Peril and battery just isn't enough anymore. Now, I want to talk about Fujin's call abilities. Now, Fujin's call abilities, they provide attack, initial bravery, like brave regen, and wind enchant, which has a very specific use. Very specific. And the LD does provide like a bit more damage, and it also gives you the wind in peril, etc. Things like that. Now, there's a very specific use that people want Fujin for, and that's to give it to Bartz, because Bartz has a wind in peril aura and is wind elemental himself, but doesn't provide wind enchant to the party. So therefore the idea is that you would use Fujin to then give that to Bartz, so that then you have the wind enchant on top of everything else, because it does last for a little while. However, it's something that I've considered. Like, I think it's a nice extra, but it's definitely not something I would go out of my way for. I think there is a misconception that, like, you need to have Fujin's wind enchant to make Bartz good. Absolute rubbish. Bartz does not need Fujin LD call to be good. Like, he absolutely doesn't. He needs his burst, he needs his LD, but he does not need Fujin. When his burst plus comes out, he gets wind enchant as well on that, so it actually renders Fujin completely redundant for that. I think, like, if you're, like, I'm going to say this now, if you're pulling on this banner, you're pulling for 9. If you get Fujin, then yes, it's nice that you'll have that call ability already available for Barts. But if you don't get Fujin, there are so many other abilities that you can use that will work perfectly fine for him, if not better in some ways. So for example, if you're taking Barts with Ignis's call ability, you still get the Enchant Imperil, but it's just fire instead of wind. You then get the weakness damage on top of it, which you'd also get from Kryl, and Fujin doesn't provide. And you also get, like, if in the case of Ignis, you get HP damage plus as well. So I think that while I've said that there are people, I've said it in my Future Pulls video before, I've said that there are people who want to pull for Fujin based on Barts. And that's still true. There will be people who want to pull for Fujin based on Barts. What I'm saying is, if you are concerned about your resources, focus on pulling for Barts. Don't focus on pulling on things that you might use for Barts on odd occasions, because honestly there aren't very many situations in which you can't use, which you can only use Fujin and you couldn't use other things because they're immune to imperils, and you'd need to use Barts is one. They are few and far between. They happen, but it's rare, and I think that they're like, you just don't have to have Fujin to make Barts good, and I can't reiterate that enough. I personally, and I'll tell you my pulling plans now before we get to the bit of the video, I'm probably going to throw some tickets at this banner. But because I want 9. If I get Fujin, I'll be happy about it, because I can use her with Barts. But I'm not going to go out of my way for Fujin for that one very specific use, considering how lackluster she is in my party. She's not like Faris, where Faris is a character that I went ham on, A, because I love Faris. I love Fujin too, but Faris is a character that I know I'm going to use that call ability on regularly, like very regularly. Whereas with Fujin, it's a very specific use for a very specific character, and she's practically unusable because of that character in your main party. And then going into her high armor, she actually provides exactly the same things as 9 does. So she has Unity Keystone, which I know I love, and 3% on bravery, 1% on HP. It's nice. And like I said, if you really love Fujin, you can use her. She is fine. Like, she'll get the job done. She's very good in this particular mission. Like, she allows you to completely ignore the Lufenia rule, where no other character can really do that. But just be warned that as time progresses, she is going to get thrown under the rug quicker than a lot of characters. So now let's talk about the Lufenia mission that comes along with 9, his Lost Chapter. And I'm going to say this now, this one is an absolute pain in the backside if you are not prepared for it. But they take loads of turns, they move their turns around, they have HP damage reduction, they hit like a bus, and if you take any elemental damage that is not wind or dark, you are going to have a bad time, because they counter it. That you have to take wind, dark damage or non-elemental damage and nothing else. Basically, the ESP dolls have a mechanic where they will counter any elemental damage that isn't wind or dark with an attack that cleanses all of their debuffs, gets rid of all your buffs, and it just provides a complete nightmare for you. So just don't do it. It also happens with certain status effects on certain characters as well. So bringing characters like Mog or Agrius, not that you'd really bring them to this anyway because Mog is water damage, etc. But they have counters in place for certain status effects as well. So just be very warned of that. A lot of the clears that I've seen for this will make it so that the enemies don't get any turns. So if you have access to like Terra Garland Yang, then you'll be fine. If you have access to Cloud Garland, Aranea, Golbez, and you have the right abilities that in place to do so, you can actually use Fujin's regular call to give you a buffer for the amount of turns that you'll take to take the orb down, etc. Because the orb itself is weakness damage, so obviously wind/dark damage, but it only adds 2 turns, so you're going to need to be doing it a lot. If you have Fujin, it means you can ignore the orb entirely, because you'll just be dealing wind damage the entire time. Golbez will deal dark damage, and therefore he'll do it, but he only does that for himself. He doesn't enchant the party. Characters like Xander aren't going to be any good here, because you're going to be dealing damage other than dark, which means you're going to be triggering the counter, and that's no good. So you just have to deal straight dark, straight wind damage. If you wanted to, this is a Lost Chapter, and the sort of limited reward should still be live by the time Bart's comes out. So if you wanted to wait for him, you could wait for him to come back and do that as well. Now, to go into some of the mechanics of it, basically they like to maneuver their turns around after they've taken turns so that they're getting multiple attacks. And the idea behind this is that you take 9 along so that you're able to shield this, get rid of the HP damage through the White Knight buff, and then just push back really hard because you'll have Rebellious Fangs up. And then the main ESP doll has a mechanic where he takes 20% less HP damage as long as both of his mini dolls are alive. If you kill one of them, then that's going to be the easiest time you're going to have. If you kill both of them, then you better hope you've got a lot of delay in your kit, because the main boss will like enrage and go off. Now, the main boss himself doesn't actually have the Lufenia orb. It's the dolls that do, the mini ones either side of him. And like I said, you need to be able to deal wind or dark damage to them consistently in order to be able to do that. So honestly, with summons and stuff, you're going to want to take Diablos or Pandemonium. When it comes to taking a friend unit, you're going to want to take Golbez most likely. Or like one strategy I've seen very commonly used is Golbez and Garland, or Terra and Garland, along with Yang and Fujin's regular call. Because then you're using, if you use Fujin's regular call on Yang, then you're dealing wind damage with Yang every time you attack with anyone else. So you then go Terra, you then use your LD, you then go off, you then Garland, you use Burst, you go off. Yang's going to do all of the work for you. But just be very, very cautious with their turns, because they do HP damage a lot. Obviously, this is 9's Lost Chapter. You're going to need to counter things very regularly. But the primary functions are Fujin is the mandatory character or rather the banner character, because she provides wind damage for your party. She's the only way that you can ignore the orb entirely. I have seen clears for Dark Knight Cecil alongside Cloud, although I actually prefer using Cloud as a call ability here, using Blade Beam to make it so that they've delayed for a bit more so that you can get more wind and dark damage in. Try to focus, just try to focus on one of the dolls first in terms of damage, then deal with the main one, and that way you can use your damage to kind of keep the Lufenia orb on the other doll active for as long as possible. Summons and bursts, etc. will obviously help here, but if you don't have access to this, this is a pretty hefty gated mission. Like, you need to take wind and dark damage. You cannot take any other element. It just won't work. So just be warned that this one is a bit narrow in its focus, but as long as you have the characters available to do it, then you'll be fine. So now, of course, we come to the big question. Should you be pulling for 9 and Fujin? Now, first things first, if you already have 9, don't pull here. I think there are much better banners for you to be saving for. I think if you've got 9 already, you'll be very pleasantly surprised by how strong his LD boards actually are. And I think that if you don't have 9, I've gone backwards and forwards on this banner a lot. This was one that when I was doing my future pulls video, I really wasn't sure how I felt about it. Luckily, I managed to get Gold Bez, which means that I have an easier time with the Lufenia mission than I would have done without him. But if, honestly, 9 fulfills like so many different roles at once, and he's the kind of character that I've glossed over in the past and I've regretted it every time. So characters like Raijin or Desh or 9 the first time around, I've kind of glossed over these offensive healer based characters, but honestly, they're always the ones I really miss out on whenever I've not pulled for them in the past, so I don't really want to miss out on him here. What I plan to do is I'll probably use tickets here and hope to get 9, and if I get Fujin along the way, then cool, I'll use her. I'll use her for a little while. I will use her Wind Enchant on Bance because I do think it's a nice thing for him to have. But when it comes to Fujin, she's so lackluster in your main party that I just can't recommend her. Like, she's very... Like I said, there's so many good Enchant Imperil characters that you just, unless it's wind specific, you're just not going to use Fujin. She doesn't do the HP damage plus 10% that Ignis does. She doesn't do the EX attack that Kryol does. She just doesn't have access to all of that. She launches, which is nice, and the LD gives you battery on some of her stuff, but she doesn't provide the buffs that you really need for this day and age. And I think that if you're pulling for a call ability, you guys know I advocate pulling for call abilities, but pulling for a call ability for one character where you could just as easily use someone else, that's pushing it a little bit. And like I said, if you get her on the way to 9, or if you do feel that the Wind Enchant is really powerful for Bartz and you can't live without it, then fair enough. But I do think that 9 is very worth your resources, because the ability to take 0 damage at any time, that's the winner, if you ask me. Considering especially how much damage his EX can do, the fact that he puts the shields up, he heals, his HP plus is good enough that you can use it when you're waiting for other skills to load up, and having Brave damage down as standard, like permanently, like Gabranth does that, and we don't really use him because he doesn't have a lot of the other support abilities to go with him. 9 does. He puts up the buffs. He does the auras, really powerful offensive auras, particularly when Rebellious Fangs is up. And he heals, and he shields, and he does all of that stuff on top of it. So I think that, honestly, he is a character that shouldn't necessarily be overlooked. I'm not sure I'd use gems here, necessarily, purely on the back of the fact that Bart's batch is going to be so expensive, and I think everyone should be saving for that, because Bart's, Galoof, and Tifa are all incredible characters that are very worthwhile for as many resources as you can throw at them. But if it weren't for them, I'd consider using gems here. But as it stands, I think it's a ticket job. Go for 9. If you don't already have him, if you do, then it's an easy skip. And if you get Fujin along the way, then great, you've got an extra toy for Bart's to play with. But don't sacrifice your resources for Bart's to get something that's only really usable for Bart's. So now we go into Would You Pull, the section of the video where you, the viewer, get your chance to make your voice heard and let everyone know whether you would or wouldn't pull on any given banner and why. And obviously today we're going to be talking about Fujin and 9. So thank you very much once again to all of my patrons for casting their votes and their comments, of course. And this one is kind of predictable as far as I'm concerned. Like, I kind of saw this one coming. I think a lot of people had 9 the first time around. Sadly, I didn't. Noctis's batch was horrendous to me, and I couldn't get 9 the first time around. So that's why I'm probably going to throw some tickets here. But in terms of other people, nobody is using gems here. Like, nobody. Like, 0% gems. 19% said that they'd use 100 or more tickets. 52% said they'd use less than 100 tickets. And 29% of people said no altogether. And I think that a lot of people here would just... They're saving for Bart's. Let's be honest here. Everyone's saving for Bart's. Everyone's saving for Tifa. I'm really saving for Galoof as well because FF5 and he's really good. But there's so many things to save for in the future that it's really hard to justify spending any more than tickets here. So going into some of the comments, Panic says, so this banner I want 9 and Fujin. I purposefully skipped 9 the first round in favour of Warrior of Light, just so that I could pull for him with Fujin's LD. 9's HP guard buff that turns to an attack after getting hit is very useful, and I'd love to be able to use Fujin again in some shape or form because launch characters are some of my favourite characters in the game next to counter-based characters. So in light of that, this banner gets 100 tickets exactly in hopes of getting 9's whole kit and Fujin's LD. Still going to need all my gems in the next 5 months or so. I mean, 100 tickets, I mean, maybe I'm jaded here, but 100 tickets to get a whole kit and Fujin's LD? I'll be impressed if you manage that. Like, I mean, the game's really unkind to me if I've never had a banner like that for a very long time. But I think that if you haven't got Golbez's BT as well, like, if you could throw some tickets here. Like, I mean, you know, any banner in which you have neither character is really nice to look at. Like, I mean, I went in on Desh's banner, even though I didn't particularly care about Desh because I wanted Desh and Yang because I didn't have them. I just worry that perhaps you might need to temper expectations on 100 tickets. But launch characters are fun. Totally get where you're coming from with that. They are really good fun, and having like Enchanting Peril on top of launch is fun. It's just such a shame that Fujin's LD does so little. And then going into the next one, Goose says 300 tickets for me. 9 is looking like a very strong support, and I'm glad to see he's getting some of the hype he deserves. Unique mitigation-based toolset, high personal damage, a very competitive aura, and a core with a shield. Probably the strongest LD boards we've seen since Squall. Fujin, on the other hand, weak. I love the disciplinary committee, but her LD is deeply disappointing and probably would have looked weak months ago, let alone now. Her call is a nice little consolation prize kit extension for Bart's, and I'll use it if I get it, but definitely not worth pulling for. Literally the same as me. This is literally exactly the same as everything I've said. I think that Fujin should be treated as a consolation prize and nothing more. She's cool to have. Like, if I got her, I'd use her. I'm not going out of my way for her. Doc Shooty says 300 tickets for Fujin. Golbiz was kind to me, and as Bart's doesn't get Wind Enchant until BT+, the hope is that I can get her to glue to Bart's to give my Aura bot more utility. It's a luxury, but a luxury I'd been planning for. 9 I got the first time around, and he's a very fun character to use. He's a great role filler if your roster is sparse, bringing mitigation, auras, damage, and healing all in one neat package. The banner is a hard one to recommend just based on who comes after, but 9 and Fujin are both solid characters. They just aren't exceptional. That's a totally fair comment. I think that if you want, like, it is a luxury, but if you have a plethora of resources, you have a lot of resources that you can spend on a luxury, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with pulling for Fujin if you really want her for Bart. It's just something that I think could be sort of circumvented by using certain other characters. There are situations where you will want Fujin LD. There is. But they're few and far between, and if you don't have it, you can live without it. Bart's is not bad without Fujin's LD. Far from it. He's still one of, if not the best characters in the game to come for quite a while. And then finally, Nalthian says it's a no for me because I already picked up 9 LD the first go around, and as much as I loved using Fujin with Kais, Noctis and others when she got her EX+, I feel the same. Her LD just seems so thoroughly underwhelming that I can't justify it. I know some people are holding out hope for a Sarah-like global first rework, but I think that's the longest of long shots. There always has to be a worst LD, and unlike the Sarah banner, this banner still has something really valuable in 9, so Square isn't worried about a banner that everyone will just easily skip. I've heard a lot about people saying that they're hoping for a Sarah-like rework for Fujin. If that happens, and I agree with Nalthian here, I think it's a very long shot, then maybe we can readjust our feelings on the banner then. But as things stand, I don't think that she's worth your resources. I want to really like her. I do. I love Fujin. I love her as a character. I love everything about her. Just not here, unfortunately. So that's everything with regards to Fujin and 9 and the Lost Chapter and everything that comes around it. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think of 9 and Fujin and whether you're going to be pulling for them. And of course, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click that bell for notifications of any future videos I might be making. And then that's going to be it from me. Stay tuned. We've got Kadaj coming up next, who... Kadaj is a character that I really, really love, and I know how that video is gonna go, and I'm like, oh no, I don't know. I hope he's nice to me, but I really love Kadaj. So that's something for you guys to look forward to in the future. And of course, if you want to come and watch me clearing 9's Lost Chapter or any other event in Dissidia, come find me on Twitch, and you can come and find me playing it on there. Thank you all again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.